Sinvusela amaswahla amahle, sinvusele benkosilenhle, sinvusele nebenkwazi yamahlokohla ehlelweni Embili Kanye Kanye. Sethemba ukuthi niphilile bakalazithe kuphina kuphi lapho kuyomsakado unithola khona libito lami ngingijona ngokaPhires Sibongo. Sethemba nje ukuthi awukuhle amaswahla amahle salishonile ke langa kulisondvo sibuya ke inkonzweni, sibuya ke indzaweni letahlukahlukene. Siyathi ke ukuthi labanye kumbe hlelo batalikhanza ekhathe, especially naba labalandzela kakhulu ibhola solo bahleli ngale balandzeli bemacembu lengingiwasho solo bafuna kubona lokuthi ngabe kwendakalani sisehlelweni thina Embili Kanye Kanye. And as I was greeting you, I was thinking about the fact that I always say bakalazithe. Ngiyabona labatelwe idolo ukuthi lokuthi bakalazithe ngabe kusho ukuthini. Uyavama lo babelona ukuthi bakalazithe yini ingogo wakhe noma kumbe yini cha benkosilenhle kwakuyindlovukade yelive leMaswati lena nayo mawuthi ubuke emuva idlalile ke inzima libonakalako lokuthi le live libe lala likhona khona indlela yekukhumbula ke abantu labadzala ekakhulukade ke emakhosi labe kakhona itolo labambise ke live ukuthi libe lala likhona khona namuhla. Ngiyabona kumbe nangale datikhathi leta lo hlelo loluthembile kanye kanye lwalikhona babafucela lokuthi nanathi sikhanzele live lilala likhona khona namuhla. Nanathi ke maswahla amahle hamba kuleyo ndlela leyo ekakhulukade ekutheni labalandzela thina lesikhona namuhla bakhanzeke live silisebentele sende ke tindvo leti tawubonakala lokuthi bekunebantu idolo lokufaka ekhathi ke emakhosi lakhona lamuhla ingwenyama yenkosi uMswati wesithathu lokufaka ekhathi ke indlovu yemhlaba le uma ubuka ke imisebenzi yayo lokufaka ekhathi imisebenzi yabo philane kuyacaca lokuthi tibongo netibingelelo takusasa titabeke tifaka wona lamakhosi lesikhuluma ngawo namuhla indlovukade kanye ke nengwenyama yenkosi uMswati wesithathu. Bengithi nje ngikhumbule ma 2000 kakhulu lokuthi ingwenyama lokuthi ke kalazithe sikhuluma ke ngendlovu yemhlaba lebekade ke ikhona ke ikhathini letandlulile. Namhla amaswahla amahle sifuna ke ukukhulumisa indzaba la njengoba ke sikhuluma indzaba ukuthi live aliye Embili liye kanye kanye sikhula ke live line challenges lafaka ekhathi ke ukuthi letinye tindlo lama ngabe sifisa kwani kudenda angeke dizedendeke emaside nakule ngakubida ngesilumbi ukuthi ngema primary resources lafaka ekhathi ke emandi for instance lafaka ekhathi ke emandla pheceledi energy noma ngabe siyafisa kulanza ke labatawuvula ke imisebenzi yemabhizinisi ekhaya ke Eswatini kodwa uyokhanze ukuthi leto defiso ngeke dizediphumelele ngoba lokunye kwako ukuthi ngakuthi icapacity noma kumbe emandla ako achamuke ke Samuel ukufaka ekhathi ke gesi. I know for instance ukuthi indzaba yeku attractor noma ke khangeke bosoma business bangaphandle lokulesi kubita ngesilumbi ukuthi I foreign direct investment ibe nawo lama challenges kakhulu kade mangabe live lisoma labanye bosoma business uyukhanze ukuthi mase badadisha lokuthi angakanani emandla lesiphehlela wona thina ekhaya Eswatini ukhanze ukuthi mancane kakhulu njengoba ke of what we have or what we need we only produce about 20% and the rest which is 80% sikuthola ke kumakhelwane bethu eNingizimu Afrika na7 la seMozambique. Kungenda ke mangabe ke ungisoma business so wenda ke nakule sikubita ngesilumbi ukuthi due diligence ukuthi makukendeka lo makhelwane awanciphise lamandla batawukhona labantu lokuthi le business yami iba yi sustain ukhanze ukuthi ke sesiyawaluza lawo mathuba aloyo somabhizinisi leyo elive lakithi ke liphokophele ekutheni ke liqinise ke lohlangothi ke lwetemandla kuze kuthi neku attract I foreign direct investment kube semathubeni ke lamahle. Sifuna ke ukukhulumisa leyo ndzaba leyo maswahla amahle namuhla ngicele ke libandla le Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority lelatwa ukuthi ngingesela ukuthi selike lisivakashele la ngilibite ke ikakhulukade ke kulandzela ukuthi libe nemsebenzi ekhathini eliviki lapho belikathe ke lithula ke uhlelo lolitawuphehla gesi lo lingani ke ku 40 megawatts of biomass energy. Yini yona leyo biomass ngikuphi lokunye lesebakwendile lokutawelekelela live lokuthi libe na gas lowanele letiphehlela yena ke ekhaya ke Eswatini. Sikhulumisa ke lenzaba ngaphasi kwesihloko esesilumbi lesithi towards an energy sustainable future in the kingdom of Eswatini. Sithi ke Maswati atawusitakala ikakhulukade ngalokuthi ngethemba ukuthi akhona nemathuba ukuthi kutaba nemathuba emisebenzi kube nemathuba ukuthi bosoma business labancane nanabo bakhona ukuthi bathole ke ama opportunities. Ngihletike la nababe Vusimuzi Mkhumane lo ngu Chief Executive Officer. Babe Mkhumane ngicela ukubingelela lo mtsala nguphe lithuba lekuvusela eMaswati.
Siyabonga Phires ngingabingelele eMaswati nje lalalele lo hlelo lwanamhla kuthi yawo siyathokoza nathi ukuthi usicele sitofika la sicabanga ukuthi sitakubambisa kule njongo lo ishowo ye energy for the future.
Sibonga kakhulu CEO. Ukhona ke nasikhumbuza ngambulela communications manager noma ke ngilobu kade kuxhumana kuloke lo hlangothi ngambula ngubingelele mnethu ngibonga nethuba lokuthi ube khona la nguphe ithuba lokuvusela eMaswati.
Sibonge Mr Pires sivusela neMaswati la sibukela kwemakhaya kuyimfokoto kithi sibe khona la store khulumisa indzaba yekuqhubekela phambili silive sibambisene.
Sibonga kakhulu ngambule. Ngicela nje kucala ngawe CEO lana kumbe sitawuthatha ke sithombe emcondo sibuyele emuva. Uhulumende usukumisa lo hlangothi lwe Eswatini Energy Regulatory Authority. Ngiyabona kumbe iminyaka seyithayibe siphohlongo kumbe kuya ngetulo. Ungasichazela nje kafishane ngeestablishment yale organization and what was government's objective and the initial mandate that he gave or she gave to the organization when it was initially set up?
When the organization was set up, it was following the energy policy of 2003, which had been crafted by government. And what came out of that was that the manner in which our energy sector is being managed or being implemented was that you had the utility, which was an operator and a regulator at the same time. And so you needed an element of transparency, and you needed an element of determination of how things should be to at least unbundle the sector. So one of the issues that came up from there was issues of, I think that we started with was issues of tariff. So the tariff issue was a key element, but there are so many other programs that have come through that we can talk about and at length.
Of course. You do mention the fact that the issue was to try and put into enablement the act, but I'm sure government also had concerns concerning the energy sector in its entirety. What are some of those concerns which I think government was hoping with the existence of a regulator like yourselves, probably those challenges were going to be overcome?
The challenges are still in existence even now. The issues of security of supply is still an issue. You have already indicated earlier on, mentioning that we are importing about 80% of our needs. That's still true. However, we, in an effort to try and overcome that, we did come up with a program of procuring power, but that was done through what we called unsolicited bidding. And we did issue a number of licenses to some organizations or companies. A number of them have failed to take up. So that issue was a real challenge. And through discussions with the ministry and everybody, it was apparent that it's not a route to follow. And however, the Act, the Electricity Act, which the regulator has to manage as well, did pronounce how power should be procured in the country. It was through competitive bidding. And I think the minister mentioned it quite eloquently on Wednesday. So we then looked at it and said, together with the ministry, we need to embark on this. However, the key element that needed to enable that program was that there needed to be an integrated resource plan, which an IRP, in quotes, the master plan that we're working with. So the master plan had to be crafted by the ministry, and the ministry, after crafting that, had to look at ways and means, because that's a long-term program. In terms of short to medium term, what can be done, which then cascaded into the short-term generation expansion plan, which is now being used by the regulator to procure per the decision of the master plan. So we think this is going to work quite well, and it's a way to go, because in the unsolicited bidding process, we are only looking at one supplier saying, I'm going to give you this much, and this is the tariff. But in this one, you have an array of suppliers who are competing to provide the best, which we classify as the most economic and effective tariff for the country. And I think so far it is showing that it's going well, and the people that have embarked on it have shown enthusiasm, have shown zeal to compete. And on the first tranche, it's going quite well up to now.
Yeah, those are some of the issues we will speak to later in terms of what stages have been taken. The issue of energy, yes, it is of national importance, but I think when the regulator came into the space, it was important that we bring on board consumers, because they also play an important role, especially as consumers, whether domestic or commercial. How has the regulator been able to make sure that participation of consumers in the energy sector in the country? I think this question is important for me, because as we talk about new developments, we need to make sure that the consumer understands, and so that they can also appreciate and probably even participate in the programs that are coming up.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Pires. Basically, the issue of introducing an energy regulator, I would say what it did, it brought some bargaining power, so to say, to consumers who were already in existence, but they had no voice, I would say. Things were done in a way that probably was not accommodative of their views, of their opinions. But when a regulator came in, the element of transparency in how decisions are made became like real. So to say, it became the engagement of stakeholders and consumers is actually an international practice. We are affiliated to regional regulators as well that does the same activities, the same engagement with stakeholders. And what we did when we came in, we made sure that whatever instrument, whatever decision we want to take, be it a regulatory instrument that we're developing, there is an element of a consultation of stakeholders. Basically, what we want there, we want to develop something that will work not only for the regulator, but as well as the beneficiaries in the sector, which are the consumers. Yes.
And so you have already mentioned the fact that in the past we have seen the failure of unsolicited bids, and one would want to know what the challenges were, because if you get a company or an organization that says, I'm interested in supplying you your grid this much, you give them the license, but obviously like you have said, they fail along the way. Is it an issue of the industry or the regulatory issues? One would want to know, because I believe it is important as we talk about new projects and opportunities, if those challenges are not going to play in the same manner as being experienced by the unsolicited bid previously.
I think if one looks at the situation as it stands right now and trying to dig further into what exactly happened, you come to the point that some of them did not have the right experience to undertake the project. Some of them did not have the correct or the right funding, because when it came to the business plans that they were presenting to us, and when we were analyzing, we had a number of questions which they got answered. But once the license has been issued to say, okay, now execute according to your business plan, that's where everything collapsed. You find that the person did not have the right financial strength, or the person did not have the right contracts to execute the task. So the issues are quite varied. Some of them did not even have the land issue that needs to be put right from the beginning. The EIA, some of them had challenges. So there had been a number of those issues. Now, what we believe will be correct, or what is correct now, is that the people that have come in are being placed in a situation whereby they have to issue certain bonds, which we call performance bonds. So you cannot put your money when you know you're going to fail. So that is what is encouraging, and whatever that they have done up to now, they have demonstrated beyond doubt in terms of ensuring they have the right funding structure, they have the right EPC contracts. That's the contractor to put this, the station in place.
Yeah.
Almost all the things are coming together in the right manner, and the biggest and the most encouraging issue is that when it comes to the tariff issue, the tariff will be a tariff that is competed for, as against the unsolicited bidding, which, as much as we're going with it, we're concerned in that the tariffs that were coming up were quite high. And the concern being, will they be affordable by the consumer? As my colleague has already indicated, we do have public hearings when we look at tariff issues. Now, if we are looking at a tariff, you want to make sure that the tariff can attract other industries to come into the country because of the efficient and economic nature of that tariff. You want to make sure that the ordinary consumer can afford the tariff, and at the end of the day comply with the use of modern energy for all our domestic and industrial needs.
Of course.
Yeah.
Ultimately, Skhumbuzo, the goal is to get the country to a sustainable level of energy, domestically produced. I have already mentioned the fact that this has become a challenge over the years, especially with regards to attracting foreign direct investment and some other elements of the economy that are being affected by us not being sustainable in the future. Whether now we deliver or produce energy by unsolicited bids or by solicited bids, the goal is to make sure that we minimize our procurement of energy from external sources, which I think in these two cases it's in South Africa and Mozambique. Let's talk about the stages that Eswatini has already undertaken over the years to make sure that we speak to our goals as a country, to make sure that we produce domestically, to minimize what we source from outside.
Okay. What we did as a country, basically, probably I'll start with the issue of how we've changed the sector, having been present as a regulator. Not only have we empowered consumers in terms of having a voice, but even the service providers, the licensed entities, there is that element of knowing that I am being monitored. Am I compliant? If I'm not, there is a regulator that will monitor my performance now and again. So there's been some improvement in efficiencies here and there, and you can see that even when it comes to issues of technology, instead of people now spending so much money in monitoring lines and all that, there is improvement in technology and a lot of other things that are being done by licensed entities. But then to talk about what we have done as a regulator to ensure that we upscale the country, get the country ready to sort of minimize what we import as a country. The CEO had mentioned earlier on that actually the energy the Resistor Act actually had a provision for procurement of power being a role of the regulator, and in 2018 it became those powers were fully handed over to the authority to now start a process of procuring power for the country, but in a competitive way. And basically what we were doing there, we were implementing a short-term generation expansion plan that has been developed by the ministry, of course in consultation with the rest of the other stakeholders in the energy sector. So what we do, we look at projects that can be affordable or least cost approach in terms of choosing which projects or technologies we can go for. We started with solar, then we're now on biomass. Basically we're trying to cover as much as possible the technology that we can procure locally and do with the resources that we already have locally as a country before we look at any other resources that we need to go and probably get from outside the country.
Let's talk about one of those projects which I think has been a major milestone for Eswatini and the country, the solar power project, which is earmarked to produce 40 megawatts. Let's talk to that project and in terms of what is happening on the ground now and how this 40 megawatts is going to contribute or mitigate the challenges of us procuring probably a 40 megawatts from South Africa. Is this going to mitigate mitigation enough coming from the 40 megawatts of solar?
Okay. Basically, 40 megawatts, I will start with the fact that the solar that we're talking about, it's a technology that will give us sufficient power up to 40 megawatts as we had modeled it for the country, but only when there is the sun. And that is one challenge that we foresaw as a country when we modeled the technologies. So as things go now, I would say we're on the right track. We're almost completing the project, the process of procuring those 3, 4, or in 5 IPPs that will set up plants and generate power for the country, which will be sufficient to keep the country going during the day. But then, because it's only when there is the sun, we need base load as a country. That is what we need to be improving on if we have to really reduce what we're importing. So that is why you realize that we are moving into biomass now, which provides a bit of a base load instead of, actually it provides a base load instead of just power when there is the sun. So and the advantage is that as a country we already have, I would say, some kind of feedstock that will help us with those biomass plants, because we do have we do farming, we do have forestry waste that can be used as part of the feedstock into those plants.
Maybe we'll talk to the biomass project in detail, but I think I did mention in my opening remarks the fact that there's going to be some spillover benefits which will be realized by the general consumer, the general members of public, and in particular small and medium enterprises or even local private businesses. As Komuza is talking about the involvement of our public-private partnerships as a means of implementing the solar project, have our local people had an opportunity, or are they participating? Are you seeing some participation from the local private sector with regards to taking a stake in the solar energy project?
From what we have seen, the enthusiasm is very high from the local stakeholders. Maybe let me also take a step back, just a short one, in that as we were looking at this whole project in terms of power procurement by the regulator, we have to take note of the ministry bringing in or crafting what we called an IPP policy. The IPP policy addresses the issues of how the independent power producers will come into the market and the roles that they will play. And it is from that perspective that it was part of the implementation of the Electricity Act, which we are referring to as Section 25, which empowered the regulator now to do the procurement. So you also needed to have that IPP policy for it to be effective. Now, coming to the issue of the local stakeholders coming in, there are a number of ways in which the local stakeholders are coming in. There have been provisions in our RFP, in terms of what content should we retain within the country. And that has been taken up, and the regulator had also done some spade work to enable the local participants to participate effectively. That was talking to the financial institutions to come on board, which they've all come on board. And the issue is not only at the investment level, but you will note that currently we are pushing towards about 2 billion of power being procured from outside the country. So if we could have a good impact on that, what that would mean therefore is that quite a component of the power will be produced locally. Like once we have the 40 megawatts that is coming in from biomass, 40 from solar, the utility is also doing a 10 megawatt from solar, and there will also be another hydro. So you're looking at about 100 megawatts that will be generated from within, which will bring us up to almost half of our requirements. So what will that do is that instead of exporting close to 2 billion going out, we are likely to be exporting half of that. And the balance that will be procured from locally, it will enable those companies to pay income tax. The employees will be able to pay as you earn. So there will be some circulation of money in that, as the consumer pays the utility paying the producer will have employees, the producer will have local resources that will be put into the system. So you will see quite a fluid economy in terms of local
monies which we previously were losing to another economy.
So that should be able to improve our economic sustainability in a way.
Yeah.
So that in itself is a big plus, let alone the fact that it will be reducing the imports that we currently
and I think I may want to inquire Skumbuzo, because if we talk about the energy sector, we are talking about a sector that still needs people to get to know about the developments that are coming up. And in particular in the era of COVID-19, where there's restrictions in movements, in gatherings and so on and so forth, how has the regulator been able to bring up to speed the private sector with regards to what's happening in the industry, so that they realize the opportunities, like the CEO is mentioning some of those opportunities, because probably there hasn't been some stakeholder engagement. I don't know if there has been, so you don't want to find yourself in a situation as a businessman where you would have wanted to make an investment or partner with other investors, but due to the lack of information because of COVID-19 and its restrictions, how has the engagement been like with regards to these two projects, which is the solar project and the biomass project?
Thank you, Mr. Pires. When COVID came in, it actually changed a lot of things in how we normally do things. One of, as I've mentioned earlier, one of our common activities is to be out there and engage consumers now and again, and of course just make them aware, educate them on what's happening. But because we are working with stakeholders, with human beings, with people, COVID being the animal that it is, it became difficult to interact with our stakeholders, especially on a face-to-face interaction. But what we did, we improved our presence on digital platforms as a company, and we have seen a lot of traffic and engagements. And actually, we are getting more inquiries from our Facebook page, from our website as well, from stakeholders that are even participating on solar, that have got interest in other projects that they are seeing probably online being published. We've improved our alliance with additional partners. We've got presence in engineering news websites where we also interact with make stakeholders regionally aware of what is happening in the country, and we get a lot of feedback from those platforms as well. So basically we've shifted our focus from just the physical interactions to at least digital platforms. You'll notice that last week when we were launching the biomass plant, we had an option for people that could join the launch virtually. When we launched the solar project, it was a huge success. It was a physical launch of 150 people in one hall. Things were normal. We could not do that last week. We had to opt to go virtually, allow people to join us virtually, and the response was impressive. For the first time doing things digitally and going virtually on such interactions, it was quite a success.
Perfect. And I think I did ask this question earlier on, and I do want to bring it up again. Okay. The fact, the issue of the unsolicited bids failure in the market, and the minister made some really interesting remarks, and I think it was an emphasis to say the country cannot be held ransom because of investors or people that come in and say we can do A, B, C, D, only to find it doesn't happen, when energy is in fact a priority for economical development in the Kingdom of Eswatini. How are we going to ensure, the fact that this doesn't happen, and how does the issue or the factor of solicited bids secures the country from the failure of a project that we are earmarking to start, the solar power and the biomass one that we will talk about shortly?
Yes, you have rightly quoted the minister having said that, and the way we have looked at it is basically that if you are running in a competitive environment, there is more incentive for you to win, having put your name up front. On the unsolicited one, yes, it failed. Almost all the applicants that came through, except I think about 2 are still trying, but it did not work at all. But our biggest risk on that was that we would not be able at that point in time, and we were not able to compare the tariff that was being put on the table with any other, right? And the stringent conditions that were being placed were that people were not getting into a situation of having to put a performance bond. So it was just that someone is coming in, is presenting his business proposal, there is no bonding on that, and he gets awarded the license, and at the end he is not performing. So there is nothing that they were morally losing or financially losing. In this particular one, if you do not perform according to the specs that have been put, you have a lot to lose because of the bond structure that has been put in place. So there is no point in saying you will try when you know you have put a bond of about $1 million that you will lose because of failure. So once we have issued the license to that person, it is embedded on that person to make sure that it delivers, because before he gets the paper that will have been signed, he will have put in a certain sum of money in an escrow account to ensure that should he fail, that is not refundable. Yeah. So that is why we believe it will come through. And also the amount of preparation that has gone through. Remember, we talked about the request for qualification, which we called RFQ. You had to put in substantive documents, and you had to do a lot of work. And my colleague did indicate that we have run some of the programs digitally. When we were running that one, we had a bidders conference, which was on virtual platform. And people had to come in, and they were paying money to be able to participate on that through, money for them to get into the link. So up till now, they've been putting an effort, and each of those efforts have a cost implication. So you can't put so much investment and then all of a sudden fail to deliver, let alone the physical cash that you have to put as a performance bond. So
it does secure the success of the project.
It does secure the success of the project, and up to now we think it's going quite.
I will have to ask Skhumbuzo to try and unpack just briefly the biomass project, which was launched on Wednesday. But I think before we do that, CEO, I just want you to give us a brief account of how things will pan out in terms of the 2 projects contributing to the energy grid in the country. The 40 megawatts of solar power plus the 40 megawatts of biomass, which was launched on Wednesday. How much is 40 megawatts? That's my first question. Collectively, the 40 megawatts of biomass and solar, how much are they contributing towards our grid in terms of mitigating our challenges of procuring from the Republic of South Africa? Because I'm asking this question so that it makes sense to the business person, to the investor, to the consumer at home, in terms of how much relief this is going to provide to us as a country, as per our topic, even in this discussion.
Okay, maybe let me start with talking about our basic needs in the country. In terms of demand, we need about 236 megawatts of power. Let's say 240 for arguments purposes. So if we have to ensure that at any point in time we have about 240 megawatts, and then you look at the 40 that we bringing in from biomass, the 40 that we bringing in from solar, the utility bringing in 10 from solar, you already have 90. Granted, the solar power is what we call intermittent power, which means it can come in and off at any point in time, and as that happens, you need an immediate substitution of that power that has been lost, because you have to keep on running. So if you look at that, and at the same time we have one unsolicited bid that is coming almost close of hydro, which is about 13.6. So you're looking at the 40 10 plus 13, so you are looking at slightly over 100, and it means we're getting closer to our half demand. Now that in itself, we believe,
and the 1 billion also circulating locally.
Exactly, and the 1 billion circulating locally. And if one were to say, from a business perspective, I want to go into the country and invest, then you can see the effort that is being brought into place by improving the security of supply, in that even if the foreign country where we're importing from can have challenges, it can come, we can still substitute the power. And the issue of imports as well have got a serious challenge, because you're not only importing the power, you are also importing the cost structure of that foreign country, in that if they have high wages, for example, that is costed into the tariff that we are importing. If there are inefficiencies, that is costed into the tariff that we're importing. So if we are able to produce as much as we could...
In short, you are saying it's expensive for us as a country to procure, to import.
I would say so, because we have no control over the inflation of those countries. We have no control over the wages. We have no control over the feedstocks, the tendering. And without talking ill, but we have all noted the issues that in particular have come from our biggest importer in terms of the coal prices that have been transacted at, and that we're also bringing in, the inefficiencies that we're bringing in. So we are hoping that our utility, or the IPPs that will be coming in, they should be in a position to be efficient. They are small, and they will have the right flexibility with a reduced overhead. So at the end of the day, as much as tariffs will always increase, but they will not be increasing at the rate in which
they have been. Of course. And I later this afternoon I was driving past one timber company, I think in the Mbabane Mhlambanyati Road, and I realized they've got quite a huge amount of bio waste which comes from them producing different types of timber there, and there's piles and piles of it there. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if this is going to be part of the material that's going to go towards producing bioelectricity in the country. Is this a good example? Because I'm asking this so that at least Eswatini could understand how they are going to be involved, whether at a large or small scale. If I have timber that is probably going to go to waste, is this what is going to go towards this project? How am I as an ordinary Eswatini going to participate towards contributing to in the biomass energy production in the country?
Thank you, Pires. That example that you are talking about of bio waste from wood is one of the feedstock that we looking forward to see participating in the biomass plants. Wood chips. There is also waste from when you crush sugar cane, you squeeze the juice and the remains, it's called bagasse. That's also what is used as a feedstock. There's also waste that is collected.
We've got lots and lots of those in the country.
In municipal waste that is collected in different municipalities, that combined can go a long way in becoming fuel, feedstock for the biomass plants. So there's quite a lot. There are also agricultural plants that can be grown purely for the sake of feeding onto biomass plants and using them as fuel. So we've got sufficient land. It's a matter of knowing which are the right plants to buy, to grow and when, so that you can use them and participate in terms of improving.
Sounds like there's going to be a massive amount of opportunities that will be created by this. What are the projections looking like in terms of job opportunities?
Okay, at construction, you were seeing quite a bigger number of opportunities for employment at the construction stage of those plants, because that's over 900 to 1,000 employees in the different plants. We are talking about 40 megawatts biomass plants, but we are saying those plants may not necessarily be just one big plant of 40 megawatt. It may be 2-3 different plants in different locations, and all those plants being at construction stage, they will absorb quite a number of people working there. Then when they are operating, of course, there will still be opportunities for employment for purposes of maintenance as well.
Yeah. In just a minute or so, CEO, what are the timelines looking like? We don't want to have this discussion and sound like we're talking about pipeline issues. What can we look at in terms of implementation or these dreams coming into reality in terms of our power grid being supplied with 40 megawatts of solar, 40 megawatts of biomass?
If everything goes according to plan, as we have done, on the solar part, by the end of this month, we'll have the final bids. By the end of about November, we should have announced the winners of the solar projects. And early in 2021, we should be signing contracts of real awarding in terms of licenses and so on. And on the solar part, you are looking at about 8 to 9 months to put it together.
The biomass?
The solar.
The solar, okay.
Right. So you would be looking at late 2021, early 2022 for the solar part to be done. The biomass is a little complicated, but our targets are that we will conclude the RFQ by early in the year, in the next coming year, and again take about 6 months to conclude the RFP and award. So you'll be looking at towards the end of say the third quarter of next year, the final awards will have been done, and those people will then get going in terms of putting together the bills of EPC contracts, signing contracts for supply of feedstocks, putting together the orders for the boilers and so on. So you'd be looking at sometime in 2022 that the biomass plants will be up and what you call. So when one looks at it, we think by the end of 2022, early 2023, these will all be on the go and providing the necessary energy that is needed by the country, providing the necessary employment, reduction in terms of imports from other countries, and probably at that point in time you would also be looking at the taxes that should be coming in on pay-as-you-earn,
corporate tax and the likes.
Corporate tax and the like. So we should be looking good from that, and it should complement quite well the post-COVID economic recovery plan by the government.
CEO, thank you so much for your time, and I think this really helps, and I'm so glad that this interview or discussion has also been streamed on YouTube for the purposes of international interested parties or investors that they may want to get this information. But thank you so much for coming through to provide this critical information. Skhumbuzo, thank you so much, my brother, for coming through, and we do hope that you'll be giving us more updates as time goes on. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thanks, Mr. Pires.
Sibongile amaswahla amahle sikhulumisa ke indzaba ukuthi mhlawumbe manjani la kithi endzabeni ngedemande ikakhulukazi ke sisabuka ikakhulukazi ehlangothini lokukhicita siyawathenga kakhulu amandla. It may look like it will take time, but when it's finally done it will provide the necessary capacity and relief in the country. Jehova kasigcine amaswahla amahle sibonane ngalokudaba siphilile. Nisale kahle.